Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. And this afternoon or this morning, whenever the video gets to you, I will be looking at the topic, Game Over for Andrew Holness? Huge voter turnout spells danger for JLP. Is Andrew Holness in trouble? That is the question. The latest Don Anderson poll reveals a possible surge in voter turnout for Jamaica's next general election, and history shows that higher voter turnout often works against the ruling party. Could this be the deciding factor that gives Mark Golding and the PNP the edge? In this video, we'll break down what higher voter turnout could mean, why it could spell danger for the JLP, and whether Jamaicans are finally ready for change in 2025. Watch until the end as we connect the dots between voter behavior, party strategies, and what this poll is really saying. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video so more Jamaicans can join in the discussion. Thank you so much. Now, breaking news from the latest Don Anderson poll. Voter turnout in Jamaica could be much higher this election, and that might be one thing Andrew Holness and the JLP don't want to see. Today, we are going to break down why a bigger turnout could shift the balance of power and possibly spell game over for Holness in 2025. Very important that we understand these developments. Now, yesterday, the Gleaner did bring a story, a very important story, where it suggested here razor thin march, razor thin, it was razor thin. That was the title of the story. JLP registers increase, PNP clings to Slim's lead as undecided shrinks ahead of September 3 poll. So we have the opposition People's National Party, PNP, is holding on to a razor-thin but declining lead over the governing Jamaica Labour Party, as a new public opinion poll shows more undecided voters now favoring the JLP fewer than 2 weeks out from the September 3 general election. The RGR Gleaner commissioned Don Anderson poll conducted by Anderson's Market Research Services Limited, August 2 to 11, among 1,008 registered voters. And I'm always wondering, why are they having the samples of just that limited poll, that limited number of possible voters who might not even vote? They're questioning these people. And that is why we have to have a larger sample, ladies and gentlemen. If you're having these small sample sizes, many of these people that, have been interviewed might not even vote. So it doesn't suggest that these polls are real. Because what if just 500, even fewer people vote from the sample of 1,008? Has captured a momentum shift in the favor of the incumbent JLP. It shows the JLP support increasing by 4.3 percentage points from 29% in May, June to 33.9% in August, its biggest gain in 5 polls. The undecided bloc fell 6.4 points from 37.8% to 31.4%. So I guess they're suggesting that in that sample of 1,008, you have those who decided that they won't vote. You have those who are expressing voter apathy. The PNP also climbed, moving 2.1 points from 32.6% to 34.7%, though its increase was smaller than the JLP's. The 0.8 percentage point gap is well within the poll's point plus or minus 3% margin of error, rendering the context a statistical dead heat. The results show a significant collapse of the PNP's lead, which stood at a commanding 9 percentage points in September of last year. At that time, the PNP garnered 39.3% support compared to the JLP's 13.2%. A substantial 31% of the electorate remains uncommitted, with 14.3% saying they are not sure yet, and a significant 17.1% declaring they are not going or planning to vote. That is interesting. 17.1% declaring that they are not going or planning to vote. That's a significant number from that small sample of surveyors. This large block of undecided and disaffected voters represents the critical battleground where the election may be won or lost. So these people who are not planning to vote or they are undecided might decide to vote. We don't know. And what if they decide to vote for the opposition for Mark Holding? The JLP has seized on the numbers as clear evidence of a rising tide in their favor, coming on the back of a mass rally held on August 10, where Holness announced the election date. It's clear, momentum JLP, the Laborites are upbeat, energized, and enthused, declared JLP spokesman Marlon Morgan during an interview with journalist Dion Jackson Miller on Radio Jamaica's Beyond the Headlines yesterday. He pointed out that since the June poll, the JLP has gained 4.3 percentage points, while the PNP has seen a small increase of 2.1 points, which he characterized as hobbling along. Morgan confidently stated that the party is in full campaign mode with a magnetic prime minister promoting the party's record of achievements over the last 10 years in office. Now, that is interesting that they are suggesting that. But the Gleaner went on to suggest that the voters, they divided them into different demographics, and that the older people in Jamaica and males, they tend to vote for the PNP. So the older males, and not the older males, but the older people, and also and males tend to lean towards voting for the PNP, while we have women and the younger voters leading towards the JLP. Now, is that interesting? So if we have women and the younger voters leading towards the JLP, then it's possible that that could be in the JLP's favor because, young people might be more inclined to vote, well, those within the ages 35 and above. My understanding that the Gen Zers, those in the ages, between the ages 18 to 25, are not interested in voting. They're just not interested in voting. So it means, therefore, that that might not be well for both parties, both the PNP and the JLP. So we have, therefore, that given the fact that males and older people are more inclined towards voting for the PNP, that might be of a significant concern for the JLP, as women might be more inclined to voting than men, and younger people, and when I say younger people, I'm not just referring to those between ages 18 to 35, I'm also referring to 35 and to probably 55. They might be more inclined to voting for they're more inclined or might be more inclined to voting for the JLP. Okay, so that is something that we have to happen, which the JLP will gain a bigger traction and will definitely bring home the cake. Now, what is interesting also is that this morning, the Gleaner reported in its editorial titled, "Why More Don't Vote?" And they're suggesting a number of reasons. An encouraging finding of the latest Donald Anderson polls is that more Jamaicans say they will cast ballots on September 3rd than in the previous two parliamentary elections. So, of course, a 50.4% voter turnout, if that number holds, which Mr. Anderson says is optimistic, won't be great. But it would be something to celebrate if it signals a real halt to the decline in voter participation in Jamaica elections. Better yet, is it good? And is it good? Will it be good if we have 50% or 50.4% voter turnout? Now, the Gleaner went on to say that there used to be a time when Jamaicans voted relatively heavily in general elections, consistently over 70 and 80% from the 1960s to 1993. So we were voting in the 70% and upward 80% between in the 1960s and right up to 1993, according to the Gleaner, except for 1983, when we just had 29.4%, when Edward Taker called the snap election, when the PNPs boycotted, or the People's National Party boycotted the poll. Even the 65.2% turnout in 1997, or the 59.04% of 2002 compared to recent figures would be greatly cherished. Okay, but now we're in the 30s and the 20s. We're in the upper 30s in terms of voter turnout. And the last local government election was not impressive. I think it was what, 29 point something or 30% of the the electorate turned out to vote. Since then, however, the far less motivated to vote, 53.17% in 2011. That was not bad, 53.17% in 2011, 48.3 um 48.37% in 2016, and the meager 37.8% in 2020. And we're liking, of course, that meager percentage point, that, low voter turnout to the pandemic in 2020. Okay, so that was what people are suggesting. Now, Dr. Phillips lamented that more than 60% of the persons on the electoral roll didn't vote, apparently believing, he said, that this hard-won right was of no value to them. That was in the early 2000s he was talking. He called for a national response to the crisis, which, if left unchecked, would mean our democracy will be available to who has the power and the deepest pockets. But that's what it's available to. I'm wondering, when they're suggesting to us that these people who buy them out, who sponsor their elections, they're the ones who run the show. And he's suggesting that if we don't vote because they've been selected and we elect them, then it means, therefore, that that is a, disappearance, as it were, an assault on democracy if we don't vote, when they themselves have been selected by these millionaires and billionaires. So what is Dr. Peter Phillips suggesting here? That democracy means one that we go out to vote, and that we have the freedom to vote, and vote for whom when they have already been selected. Responding in Parliament at the time, Prime Minister Holness conceded that the apathy was in part a reflection of how we conduct ourselves as leaders, and urged MPs, particularly those of the governing Jamaica Labour Party, to behave with integrity, dignity, and efficiency. So this is what Dr. Holness is suggesting. But is Dr. Holness behaving with integrity, dignity, and efficiency? And this is what we're saying. He has to set the example for his members of Parliament. Now, the Gleaner continues to say in its editorial, should what voters told Don Anderson's interviewers hold true, this newspaper would, as we noted, welcome the development in terms of the high voter turnout. If we're going to have 50.4% voter turnout, which would, I would think, be in favor of the PNP, the opposition. Why? Because people might be suggesting that they're tired of the JLP, and that is why they are going out to vote against the current incumbent, the government. We would nonetheless caution against wild cheering unless there is evident will among political actors to commit to the moral work necessary to reverse the cause of the disenchantment by voters. The bad fact is that most Jamaicans, especially young people, don't trust their leaders and public officials. The bad fact is that most Jamaicans, especially young people, don't trust their leaders and public officials. And that is not something that is good for democracy. You must have high levels of trust if the democracy is healthy, which means, therefore, that our democracy, as they're suggesting, is not a healthy one. So it doesn't matter if you have 80% voter turnout. If the trust is low, you are not having, or you do not have, a healthy democracy. So they prefer to get on with their lives, disconnected from politics and institutions related thereto, unless that is impractical. So competitive politics becomes a matter primarily for the base of the political parties. Now listen to what they're suggesting here. This detachment shows not only in the half of the electorate who are likely to sit out the election, but in the fact that only 39% of 18 to 24-year-olds and 44% of those between 25 and 34 say definitively they will vote. That decision is partially explained by the fact that 86% of Jamaicans, according to Vanderbilt, and this is an important point that they're raising here, the Gleaner is raising here, That decision is partially explained by the fact that 86% of Jamaicans, according to Vanderbilt University's 2023 Lap-Up survey on attitudes to democracy in the Americas, believe that corruption is generalized among public officials, especially political leaders. This was the highest among the 19 countries in the survey. And although the number has declined in recent years, 50% of Jamaicans would tolerate a military coup if it was to fight corruption. That Jamaicans would tolerate a military coup, and a military coup is also a dictatorship and worse than what you have left behind. So this is what we're dealing with because our people don't understand the political process. Okay, so further, only 59% of Jamaicans gave unwavering support to democracy, placing close to the last quintile of the surveyed countries. At the same time, only 28% said they were satisfied with the workings of the island's democracy, a decline from 45% 2 years earlier and down from 59% in 2012. The perception that Jamaica faces pervasive corruption is a significant part of the foundation of Jamaica's political apathy and is among the key things leaders, especially those who form the government, will have to work to change if more citizens are to have faith in democracy and the electoral process. It's amazing how the way how they sound it, have faith in democracy and the electoral process. And people feign and they talk about religion and we shouldn't have faith. But we should have faith in men and the political process and in a democracy that is not to be. That is not even true. That does not even exist. They say that God doesn't exist and real democracy in any of these Western so-called liberal democracies is not true, doesn't exist. But yet people have faith in these things because they look and they see some of the things and some of the tricks here and there, and then it causes them to believe what their politicians tell them. Isn't it amazing? So they're asking us to have faith in the political process. But what is interesting is that if we have a 50.4 voter turnout, that would be high, in context to what we've seen over the years, right? We have to contextualize it. That is not going to be high in terms of a high voter turnout, but it contextually speaking, what we've had over recent times, since probably the past 10 years or so, have not been has not been particularly impressive. So when we look at the fact that if we have 50% or 50.4% of the electorate going out to vote, it means therefore that it might go in favor. It might be in favor towards the PNP, the oppositional party, because people might be tired of what they're seeing, the corruption that they're hearing coming from the Andrew Holness-led government. So it is something that we have to watch and see, not to mention if we have 60% voter turnout. If we have 60, 70% voter turnout, it could mean that this might be the end of the JLP's reign this coming election. So they have to be seriously watching what is happening, what is taking place, because there's just too much corruption and too much hiding of what they're doing. And they come and they give all these grandiose pronouncements and tell us what they're doing, and people believe them. I don't believe them. I take everything they say with a pinch of salt. Everything that is said from the Dr. Christopher Toftons and from the Dr. Andrew Holnesses, I take, and even from Marky G and all these people, I take everything they say with a grain of salt, with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, they have to sell you politics. And they're hoping that you will buy the good or the goodies that they are giving to you. And oftentimes they're not goodies. If you look beneath the surface, they are not goodies. So we can't now say that what they're saying is a lie because we can't prove whether it's true or it's false, but you are going to be skeptical, look at the sum total of what they're saying and try to assess if what they're saying is consistent with reality. Okay, you must do that. And for those of you who are on the ground, do it. What they say, if they talk about the Cornwall Regional Hospital, go there, do your own research and see if what Dr. Tofton is saying about Cornwall Regional Hospital is what the people on the staff are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. It is true, it is factually true. You need to go and do these evidence-based investigation so that you can decide who you want to vote for. Because at the end of the day, you are the ones who are going to suffer. The politicians are not going to suffer, even if they lose the election. Losing the election for Marky G is that he just goes on to continue his business, right? He might be further away from the capital that he wants to generate. Maybe he has more access to capital and contracts. Becoming the prime minister, he would, as Andrew Holness did or does. Okay? But it means, therefore, that if they should lose, it's just losing for their people, the ones who are also, queuing up behind them for more contracts, for greater finances. But it does not mean a win for you. All right. And that is what you have to understand. The election does not mean a win for you. Until we change the political process and the political system in Jamaica, we are going to witness people going to vote for just the elites and what they desire in their lives. And yes, you'll get some of the gravy and the crumbs, but is that sufficient to build a nation and to build it for future posterity, and your children, your children's children, and the list goes on. And many of us are not concerned about these things. We're more concerned about Marky G and Andrew Holness. And these people are making lives for themselves and for their families. Okay? And oftentimes not for you. We've got to get our act together. We've got to get our minds together and learn how to think. And we've got to gather some books together, some articles together, read our history, read about the political process so that we can be educated about how we make decisions and how we see the country and what future we see lies for Jamaica. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. Like the videos so the videos can be shared with as many people as possible.